to answer any questions you might have about teaching. But in this video, I'm going to basically answer so many different things, give so many tips and pointers and things what it takes to be a good teacher. So first of all, with that said, I've created these, I call them teacher tips. Teacher tips is what I call them. And I create these teacher tips here. Let me just quickly put a poll in here for everybody. So I created these teacher tips, and I don't know how many I have of them, but I'm going to go through each one in a little bit more of a detail. So that way, if you're looking to become a better teacher, if you want to know what it takes to make it 20 years of teaching, I've been teaching for 20 years now, hopefully these tips can help you out. They're in no particular order, so let me just start. First one is this, and I actually wrote them down here. Don't grade everything. Oh my gosh, how can I tell you? Don't grade everything. When I first started teaching, first I have this policy in my class, and I tell students this, that everything they do counts as points. Everything they do counts as points. So there's never going to be a time where they're just wasting their time. They're going to get graded for everything, because if they're putting the effort in, I believe they should get a grade for it. And so with that said, I do give them a grade for everything, but I don't necessarily grade everything. So let me give you an idea what I mean by that. When students walk into my classroom, there's an activity they do, and they do it on a piece of paper, and we go through how they set it all up, and they do the activity. And then later that period, we maybe take notes, and they do the notes, right? And they take some stuff down regarding the notes. And then from there, they do other things, some other activities in the classroom. And so whatever they're doing in the classroom does count. But then at the very end, when I collect the paper at the very end, that is when it gets graded. But here's the beauty of it. I don't grade it. I have other students grade it. And so students are grading other students' work. And so there are some things that I definitely do grade, but for the majority of things is graded by other students. Now, the reason I created this system, because if you've been teaching amount of time, you know just how overwhelming it is to do all that paperwork, right? All that paperwork is just exhausting. And so because of that, it's you got to create something to streamline the process. And so that's something I created during the process. But another thing you do is just, once again, don't grade everything. I seen teachers have stamps. Stamps, they stamp little paper when people first come in. By stamping that paper, that shows you when thing is done. So then I say grading, but the stamp shows that it's completed. So that would be a way to actually not grade everything. Then also, you don't have to ever go with a fine-tooth comb. You can look at things and say, hey, yeah, this is done or not done, completed or not completed. So there's all these different things that you can do as a way as not grading everything. So as a teacher, if you're going to be in this for a long period of time, you got to figure out, create systems, everything in place just to keep it going. All right. So once again, if you have any questions, feel free to jump on in. I've been teaching 20 years, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you might have about teaching. But as we're waiting for those questions to come on in, let me just kind of go through some more tips. If it is some more tips for teachers on how you might do things. So first one is, once again, don't grade everything. Next thing I got here for us is don't take things personally. Ooh, this is tough. This is tough. As a teacher, that is tough to do. As a teacher, I teach in middle school, and middle school has to be the hardest, in my opinion. I've taught everything from 6th grade up until 12th grade, and I can testify that middle school is definitely the hardest to teach. And because if you think about it, that age is hard to go through. If you're going through that age, 13, 14, 15, and if you remember what it's like to go through those ages, that is a hard time period. You're figuring everything out. You got all these new emotions, all these thoughts, all these feelings that you never had to experience before. And it is just crazy going through all those changes. Right? And so now you put that kid, or that student, in with 30 other students something's going to happen. Somebody's going to say something one way or the other. The situations, you name it, things are going to happen. And so, as a teacher, if you take things personally on what a student may say, um, you're going to be torn down within a few minutes, right? Just the way they respond or even what they say. And so, you got to learn to navigate the classroom with some sort of level of confidence. You got to learn to navigate the classroom. You got to care about the students because that's your job, caring about the students. But you got to understand that a lot of what comes out of students' mouths is not a reflection of you, it's a reflection of what's going on in their life. And man, some of the horror stories I've heard as a teacher, some of the horror stories of my students, those are some tough situations. And so for students to go through those situations and come into the classroom and for you not to expect something to come out, you kind of live in a fantasy land. But when it does come out, don't take it personally. It's not always a direct reflection upon you. Now, there might be some things. If a student says something, and it's just not necessarily a whimsical thing, they actually say something with some logic behind it, I listen to it because it could be a reflection of something I'm doing or not doing correctly in the classroom. But once you kind of go through that filter, you kind of analyze it, then you got to be able to let it go. Just let it go. Otherwise, you're going to be dragged down by all the emotions that are in that classroom. So, number 2 advice is don't take things personally. Number 3 on teacher tips is this: it's okay to have favorites. It is. I mean, we're all sorts of different personalities. Now, I'll give you an example. I'm a father of 3 kids, and I don't say I have favorites, but I connect with each student a little, or each of my kids a little differently. My oldest is most similar to me in personality, so I connect with her that way. Then there's my son. I connect with him because he's being a guy. I know what it's like to be a guy. There's my youngest daughter. I connect with her just because I love her spirit that she has. So each child I connect with differently, right? And that's the same thing in the classroom. You're to connect with students differently. Some may be the same personality. Some may be different personalities than you. But regardless of what it is, you got to learn to connect with students one way or the other. But out of that, you're going to develop favorites. You're going to develop some students that you just have more in sync with. All right, I'm just thinking through my past year as teaching here. There are some students that were awesome. I had a student that always came in. He was in my 3rd period class. Always came in. Every time he came in, we do that stupid little thing from Big Hero 5, the fa la 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 thing. You know what I'm talking about? We did that thing. And by doing that, I built a connection with him. By doing that, it's hard not to like somebody that you share something in common with. And so we shared that. And throughout the year, by doing that, we definitely felt a connection there, right? So that's one example. But there's other students that even were disruptive in the classroom, but yet somehow they had that spirit in them where I felt connected to them. So it is okay to have favorites in your class. But the key is this: you can't treat students differently. You're going to have favorites. Some kids are more connected to and students are more connected to, but you got to treat all your students the same. You just have to. Otherwise, if you don't, then it's going to create rifts and problems in your classroom. So it is okay to have favorites, but with that said, make sure you treat all students the same. All right? Otherwise, it's not fair to a certain group of students. So that is tip number 3. Tip number 4 I have here is, this is a practical one. Make copies before you need them. Just man, I cannot tell you how many times throughout the 20 years I've been teaching where I had to start scrambling because I wasn't prepared. And you want to make copies before you need them. And so ideally, when I do my lesson planning, I lesson plan for a month, and then the week before I really hone in on what I'm doing, and I make copies the week before I need them. So that when that week comes up, I'm not stressed about having to make copies. I'm not stressed about having to find out what I'm going to be doing each and every day. When you know what you're going to be teaching, make copies ahead of schedule. I guarantee if you don't, something's going to go wrong. I mean, one of the worst things a teacher can see is that little sign on the copy machine saying out of service, right? Something's going to go wrong. You're going to have no paper, the ink's going to be gone, staples are not going to be there, there's going to be a line. If you try to make copies right before school starts, man, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Don't do that. Plan, prepare, and then make copies way before you need them. Otherwise, woo, you're going to be hating that day. All right. Tip number 5. Oh, here we go. Lesson plan in units. So when you lesson plan, you want to plan in units. So I teach United States history. And for me, it's kind of easy to do. But no matter what you teach, science, English, math, plan in units. So for me, a unit usually lasts about 3 weeks. And so I'll give you an example. Let's say we're learning about the Civil War. We're learning about the Civil War. I will lesson plan that Civil War and I call that a unit, 3 weeks. So I will lay out exactly what I'm doing for the next 3 weeks. All right. Now, there's always fluctuations, always things are going to change here and there. But if you have an idea of what you're going to cover in that 3 weeks period of time, it makes the lesson plan so much easier. Because if you're just lesson planning for each day as it comes up, you're not going to find that rhythm. You're not going to find that flow. And worse than that, it's not going to all sync together, mesh all together. You have to make it smooth. You have to see how things tie to connect, how they connect. You have to know what the end game is. What are you working towards? And you don't do that if you lesson plan just one day at a time. If you lesson plan a unit, you have the ultimate goal. And to get real specific, here's how I lesson plan. I'll start with the end in mind. I start with the test first. All right, what do I want students to know? So ask the question, what do I want students to know? And then when I identify what I want students to know, I create the test for that. Then what I do is I go back and I plan my notes to correlate with what's on the test. So if I want them to learn something material, I got to give them the notes for that. I got to give them the information. And so once I know what I want to learn, then I decide how I'm going to deliver that information to them. And what you'll do, once you've been doing this long enough, you're going to find certain things that work, certain things that don't work. I call this kind of the plug and play system. There are certain things I do in every unit. For example, I do notes in every unit. I do an ed puzzle in every unit. I do some sort of review in every unit. And then I do activities in every unit, right? So the things that vary are those activities. And so I plug in the other 3 things. I do every single unit. I plug those in. And they all work towards the ultimate goal of what I want students to learn. And then I go out and I look for activities that will reinforce what we are learning about. And so it's called the plug and play system. Because if you just try to create one lesson every single day to whatever you're teaching, it's not going to have that cohesiveness. It's not going to be smooth. You need to have the end in mind. But once you have the end in mind, you could backward plan to get exactly what you're looking for. But it all starts with planning a unit at a time. So that is the next advice. Here we go. Number 6. Oh, here we go. Back to about being prepared. Number 6. Do not leave your classroom unless you're prepared for the next day. Do not leave your classroom until you're ready for the next day. Oh, because what's going to happen if you leave your classroom and you come in the next day trying to think about what you're going to do, having to organize something, having to create something, having to make copies, having to make sure everything's in place, you're going to fall behind. You're not going to be the best version of yourself or the best version of a teacher. Your students deserve the best version of you as a teacher, and that requires you to be prepared. So before I leave every day, I make sure things are ready to go the following day. So for example, I'll make sure I have all my notes ready to go. I'll make sure I know what I'm going to do for my warm-up procedure. I make sure I have any worksheets I need to have ready to be passed out. I kind of role play in my mind how that day is going to go. So before I leave the classroom, I am at 100% ready for the next day. So when I come the next day, turn everything on and I'm ready to go. Because inevitably things are going to come up. Things are going to come up. And if you're waiting until the day of, something's going to fall apart. So always be ready for the next day before you leave your classroom. Let's keep going. Here we go. Advice number 7, teacher tip number 7, always over plan your lessons. Always over plan your lessons. So what you want to do is when you plan out your lessons, back to that whole unit plan, how you plan my units at a time, right? You got your unit time. But then when you actually get to that day and you're planning out your lesson for that day, you want to over plan. There's a saying, which I think how it goes here, idle hands are the devil's playground, right? So if there's moments in your classroom where students are not working on something because you did not plan for it, that is when problems can arise. Not say they're going to, but that breeds time and breeds confusion and everything else for problems, behavior problems arise in your classroom. So you want to over plan. And so always have more work to do than you think you're going to get through. Because the worst thing is having like 15 minutes of class left and realizing, oh my gosh, I don't have enough here. I don't know what I'm doing for the next 15 minutes. And if you say those words, all right, it's a free time, there's a good chance that some behavior problems might come about that. So always overplan. So I'll give you an example. Back to when I do notes. I have notes in my classroom, and we do notes, and they copy down the notes and everything, and I talk. But then at the end of my notes, I have one slide that says, read these pages out of the book and take some notes. Now, I'm not necessarily expecting students to get to that point on the slides. I'm not necessarily expecting that students will ever get a chance to read the book and answer those questions. But I have it there as a catch-all because if the class for some reason ends early and I have 15 minutes, I want to make sure I have something for students to do. And so for that, I'll have a slide that said, hey, read pages 493 to 495 and take one note per paragraph. And that actually has to do with what we just learned about. So it's not wasted time. It's not they're not doing busy work. It's actually reinforcing what we just learned. But I have that ready to go just in case for some reason a class ends or I finished the material earlier. And it always happens too. There are some classes, I'm thinking back last year, I had periods 1, 2, and 3 that we would have class discussions that were phenomenal, and it would take the entire class period. Then I had other periods, like 4 and 5, where no one said a word, and we had like 15 minutes of class still left. And so then they would work out of the book. So, but always over plan. Keep that thought in mind. Idle hands are the devil's playground, and you don't want to be caught with 15 minutes of just saying, okay, it's free time, because that could lead to behavior problems. Teacher tip number 8, clean your desk and classroom on a regular basis. Ooh, here's another saying for you. Here's another saying. It goes like this. Well, I guess it's more a philosophy. It's called the broken window philosophy, the broken window thought. And it goes to this story. There's this mayor that he took over his city, and he noticed that there are broken windows. And then he would go back the following week, and the next thing he noticed, graffiti. And then go back the next week, and he noticed there's people living, homeless people living in these places. Then you go back, and you realize what happened is that the problem, which started with just broken windows, multiplied exponentially to create other problems. So something just simple as a broken window created other problems because it wasn't being addressed. And so what he did is he focused on all the broken windows. Anytime there's a broken window, he put something in play so that the window be fixed within a matter of a day or two. And when that happened, the other problems, they were curtailed. They kind of went away more. Not altogether, but they went away more. Same thing with your classroom. Try this. Try this. If you let a student write on the desk and you leave it there, good chance next period that whoever that new student is going to write more on the desk. And then next period that, more on the desk. And before you know it, what started as a little doodle first period goes into a big old graffiti on your desk by the end of the day. Because when a student sees something on the desk and they see it hasn't been taken care of, they're more inclined to basically do the same thing. And so what starts as a simple problem gets bigger. And that goes to your entire classroom. If you allow trash to be on their classroom, it's just going to grow more and more and more. You got to address the smaller problems, because if you do not address the smaller problems, they become bigger problems. So that's cleaning your desk. That is cleaning your classroom. That is in anything. Smaller behaviors in your classroom. If you don't address the smaller behaviors in your classroom, they're going to multiply into bigger problems. And the same thing with your school. If you don't address the smaller issues in school, they're going to multiply to be bigger things. And so, with that said, take care of the small stuff so they don't become the big stuff. Here, your next one. Teacher tip number 9. The Dollar Tree is your friend. Oh man, I live here in California, and the 99 cent store we had in here in California has gone away. I think they closed them all. So all we got left are the Dollar Trees now. But when it comes to decorating your classroom, the Dollar Tree is your friend. One is because you get a lot of stuff for a low price, right? And you don't want really fancy things because there's a good chance it might get destroyed, damaged, or something else. So when it comes time to decorate my classroom, the Dollar Tree is a place I go to. Now I'll be 100% transparent here. That is a weak spot of mine, is actually decorating my classroom. That's definitely a weak spot. Um, I remember I had a principal come in long, long time ago when I was first teaching. She came into the classroom, and she said, "You know what?" She noticed my classroom was kind of bare. I didn't have anything up on the wall, nothing like that. And she comes in, she goes, "You know what would be really nice is if you put some student work up. That would be really nice." And I said, "Oh, okay." And so she came in about a couple weeks later to my classroom, and I was so proud of myself because I put student work up. We're talking 18, 20 years ago here. And the student work that I put up were Scantrons. Now, if you know what a Scantron is, it's a paper about so long and has like A, B, C, D on it. And you put it through a little machine and it prints out your score. This is way before we had all the fancy computer stuff. And so the Scantron, I basically took all the students' Scantrons and I stapled them on the wall. And I was so proud of myself because I saw that as student work. I missed what she was trying to say. What she was trying to say is, hey, try to make the classroom more inviting, more decorations, right? And so since then, I've gotten a little bit better, but it's still a weak area for me is the decorations. But when I do go to decorate, once again, the best place you can go to is the Dollar Tree, something like that. And so the things I've gotten at the Dollar Tree that worked pretty well in my classroom are the little banners that kind of go around the frame things. I got some flags because I teach United States history. Some maps, perfect. I got some tablecloths, red, white, and blue, to cover different things in my classroom. So those are some things that I've gotten at the Dollar Tree. But when it comes time to decorate your classroom, I'm telling you, hit that up first, and you're going to find a lot of good things that you can use in your class. Let's keep them going. Number 10. Teacher tip number 10 is this: create routines and procedures. Oh my goodness. You want to create routines and procedures in your class. You got to know exactly what you're looking for in your class. You got to know what you're looking for as far as student work goes. You got to know what you're looking for as far as behavior goes. You have to know exactly what you want in your classroom. And then you got to create routines and procedures that enforce what you're looking for. That is it. Because what happens is routines and procedures in your classroom are systems. And when you create a system in your classroom, an effective system in your classroom, it takes a weight off of your shoulders. Now, there's a lot of front loading. You got to put some effort in. In fact, in my classroom, the first week of school, I do not teach anything the first week of school. The first week of school in my classroom is 100% designated to routines and procedures. That's how important it is. But once you put that in, once you put that effort in and you front load that information and you create those routines and procedures and you follow those routines and procedures, it makes all of the difference. So please create those routines and procedures in your classroom, because once you do that, once the students have it down, and once you have it down, there's going to be some weight off of your shoulders. So I'll give you some examples of routines. I mean, literally, I have almost a routine for everything in my classroom. So here is a routine I have. The moment students walk into my classroom, there's something for them to do. And I have it on the overhead projector or the computer, the TV monitor. It tells them what to do. I've created a routine in my classroom. I call it my warm-up procedure, that when students walk in, there's something for them to do. There's always something for them to do. And it almost always takes about 5 to 7 minutes for them to do it. And we cover that. At the beginning of the year, we spend 3 whole days on those warm-up procedures. We spend 3 whole days creating that routine down, because it's something we're going to do the entire year. Right? And so now we got this routine in place. Students come in, they do the work, the activity. Now I have 5 to 7 minutes at the beginning of the class that I can do what I need to do as a teacher. There's housekeeping things, such as, taking attendance. There's answering phone calls. There is checking in with students. There's maybe collecting work or something else. I now have 5, 7 minutes, because we got that routine in place that students can now that I can use now that time to take care of all these other things. That's one routine. I'll give you an example, another routine I have. I have a seating chart. And on that seating chart, I keep track of everything. I keep track of students who raise their hand to participate. I keep track of who uses a restroom. I keep track of behavior. I keep track of everything on this seating chart. That routine of me having the seating chart, and by me giving extra points up for students to participate, it's a game changer. It is a game changer. That's another routine I have. Here's a third routine, how to grab Chromebooks, right? And so, first of all, I knew exactly what I wanted in my class. I knew how my classroom wanted to be and everything else. So I created a routine of how students get their Chromebooks and how they return their Chromebooks. There's a routine for that. There's a routine for the end of the period. At the end of the period, I just don't say, all right, everybody go home. Everybody leave now. There's a routine for that. That if we're doing notes, I know it takes 7 minutes for students to write a summary. And then I know it takes, I give them 8 minutes before the bell rings. It takes about 5 minutes to write a summary. Then it takes about 2 minutes to count their points, and then about 1 minute to pack up. So 8 minutes before the bell rings, we have a wrap-up routine. Write a summary, we're doing notes, and then count your points, 2 minutes, and then pack up 1 minute. So there's a routine for that. But I'm telling you, if you create these routines are going to save you so much headache. It takes a lot more work up front, and you got to put a lot of effort into it. But once you know what you want and you create the routine to enforce that and the procedure to enforce that, it's going to make your life so much better. So routines and procedures are essential. Let's keep it going. Expert teacher tip number 11, classroom management is king. Oh, without classroom management, nothing is going to happen good in your classroom. Let's put it that way. Or nothing, you are not going to have the results you are looking for without classroom management. Once again, I've been teaching 20 years, and I can tell you, I've never seen a teacher get fired for not implementing the curriculum correctly, or get fired for not decorating the classroom nicely, or get fired for not necessarily, getting along with other teachers. But I have seen teachers get fired for classroom management. The classroom just seems to be out of control. And so classroom management is so important. That should be your focus. If you're a new teacher, that is what you should focus on the first year, 2, and 3, is that classroom management. And because you cannot implement an effective lesson unless the classroom is working effectively. And when you walk into the classroom, you know which classes have good classroom management, which ones do not. And classroom management doesn't mean that everybody's quiet and doing, just 100% silence and nothing. That's not classroom management. Classroom management is that as a teacher, you're able to control the environment of your class. You're able to control what students do or don't do. You have systems put in place. You have good relationship with students. Classroom management is a big spectrum of things, and there's so many little pieces that go into it. But you need to get that down. My first year, I'll tell you a quick story here. My first year of teaching, I almost got fired because of bad classroom management. And I remember my principal came into me and he said, "Hey, I don't think this is a good fit." Oh, you don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear that job. That I don't think this is a good fit. In other words, what he's saying is, "Hey, you're not doing a good job." But he's trying to say a good way, nice way of saying it. And so he says, "Hey, I don't think this is going to work out. I don't think this is a good fit." And I'm like, "Well, what's wrong?" Because, just the classroom doesn't seem to be running smoothly. In other words, classroom management was not in check. So he said, "Here's what we're going to give you one more chance. We're going to pair you up with a veteran teacher and see if that helps you a little bit." And I got to tell you, when I got paired up with that veteran teacher, his name was, I'm going to call him Mr. B was his name. Mr. B is the veteran teacher. He was amazing in the class. He had effective classroom management, and because of that, he had great lessons. Students respected him, vice versa. He respected the students. He was able to have conversation with them. He was able to implement curriculum. Students were actually doing work, all that, but it all stemmed out from that classroom management. And I watched him, and I thought, man, why can't I be doing that? I couldn't figure it out. And so I started learning a little bit from him here and there, and then I went on my own. Now, it did not go 100% smooth after that. It got better. It got better. But I'm going to be 100% honest with you. It took me about 7 years to feel really comfortable in front of the class. 7 years before I believe I had effective classroom management. Well, that means 7 years before I could really implement a lesson effectively in my classroom. That is a long time. That is a long time. Now, most teachers out there, and if you're a teacher, hopefully it does not take you 7 years to get to the point where it took me to get to. But I'm telling you, once I got to that point, things were different. I actually enjoyed my job at that point in time because I was able to have that rapport with the students. I was able to implement a lesson. I was able to see results. I was able to see students learning and getting better. That's not to say that's not going to happen at all if you don't have effective classroom management, but I promise if you do, you're going to see so much more of that. So classroom management key, focus on that 100%, and then when you have that down, then you can take your teaching to the whole nother level. All right? So classroom management is king. Number 12, expert teacher tip number 12, if you get a chance, observe other teachers. There's some amazing teachers out there. And no matter what you're doing in class, even if you're the best teacher right now on your campus, if you get a chance to observe other teachers, I guarantee you're going to walk away with something different. You're going to have a better understanding. You're going to see how a teacher maybe interacts with a student, one thing they do differently. It's amazing. I mean, because we're all different. We're all different. We're all doing different things. We're all teachers, but we all have our own kind of style to things, right? Our own procedures or routines and everything like that. And so if you get a chance to observe other teachers, I promise you're going to walk away with something. Even if they're a bad teacher and then things are horrible in class, you're going to walk away with things like, I don't want that to happen. I got to make sure I don't do this. But if you get a chance to observe other teachers, that's probably the most effective way of improving your teaching. I've actually saw this here. Looking at doing some research. And that's at the top of the list. Some of the best things if you'll become a better teacher, some of the best things you can do is, first of all, record yourself to see what you're doing, and then, pick that apart and become a better teacher that way. But at the very top of the list as well is observing other teachers, that collaboration. Find out what's working for them, what's not working for them. But if you get a chance to observe the teachers, please take the opportunity, take notes. Focus on one thing you want to get better. Walk away with at least one thing that you can implement in your classroom. And if you do that on a regular basis, man, it's not going to take you 7 years like it took me. It's going to take you a lot less time. Let's keep it going. Here we go. Teacher tip number 13, have a seating chart. I'm telling you right now, this is the basis of my classroom management. When I got a chance to observe that so many years ago, Mr. B, I got a chance to observe Mr. B. I noticed Mr. B always walked around with a clipboard. And on that clipboard was his seating chart. And I'm like, why do you always walk around with your clipboard and the seating chart? He goes, because I'm always taking notes. And even if I'm not taking notes, students are thinking I'm always taking notes. And that accountability ultimately leads to better behavior in the class and more productivity in the class. And so he always walked around with a seating chart. All right. I use that in my classroom to this day. 20 years ago, what I saw Mr. B do, I now do in mine. And so I modified it here and there. But if you ever were to walk into my classroom, you would see me with a seating chart. I have a seating chart for each period. Each period I have a seating chart. Now I'm going to tell you what's on my seating chart. I literally keep track of almost everything on my seating chart, back to the rules and procedures. So first of all, I have, of course, the students, where they're supposed to be sitting at. That's my seating chart. But then I also make notes on my seating chart. Every time a student raises their hand, I give them extra credit points. I make that mark on my seating chart. All right. Anytime a student has used the restroom, use a hall pass, I make a mark on my seating chart. I keep in track of that. Anytime there's a behavior problem, I make a mark on my seating chart. I'm keeping track of that. My seating chart isn't just a seating chart, but it's a way of tracking so many different things that are going on in my classroom. So that seating chart is essential in my classroom. Now for your classroom, you don't have to quite go through that much detail on your seating chart, but you want to have a seating chart. I think of it this way. When it comes to managing behavior, classroom problems, whatever else it might be, the seating chart is the preparation before the battle, right? It is your battle plan before the battle even begins. You can curtail, you can stop problems from even happening by having an effective seating chart. So for example, if you know Johnny is always talking, you don't want to put him in the middle of the class. That's going to create all sorts of problems. So in that case, you might want to put him kind of more in the corner by himself. If there's Miss Susie, and Susie always has a hard time seeing things, you're going to put her at the very front. If you have a student that needs some extra support, you might have them in the back closer to you so you can provide the extra support. If you have an effective seating chart and you actually put some time into it, think about where students are going to go, where are they going to be most effective at, who are they most effective with, that could create the best environment you need for your classroom that you're ever going to get. And it could stop so many problems from happening. So by creating an effective seating chart, you're going to, first of all, eliminate so many problems. But then if you use it to the level I use it, you're going to be able to track so many other things. You're going to hold students accountable where there wasn't before. So a good seating chart is going to help you in so many different ways. Expert teacher tip number 14, create boundaries in your classroom of when you arrive and when you leave. All right. So you got to create boundaries in your life. You just have to create boundaries no matter what the scenario is, who you are, who you live with, where you're doing. You need boundaries in your life. So that way you can stay kind of in your lane in a sense and stay focused on what you're going to do. But create boundaries for your work life and your personal life. So, for example, know when you're going to come to school and know when you're going to leave. Set that already in your mind and adhere to the best you can. As teachers, our work is never done. As a teacher, you are never, there is always something to do. There's always another paper to grade and always another lesson plan. There's always another meeting. There's always something to do as a teacher. And you got to create those boundaries, because if you don't, what you're going to find is that your teaching life is going to merge right into your personal life, and you're never going to find that peace and the rest that you need to be the best teacher you need to be. So create those boundaries. So give yourself, hey, I'm going to arrive to work at this time. And no matter where I'm at, no matter what needs to be done, I am going to leave at this time. Now, if you're a brand new teacher, 100% honest with you, if you're a brand new teacher, you should be expecting to put a lot of hours in, because as a teacher, there's this learning curve. Once again, it took me 7 years to get that learning curve. Hopefully a lot shorter for you. But there's a learning curve. You got to put so many hours in. You got to learn different things and try different things. As a teacher, there's certain things you're going to have to learn and figure out. So what you want to do is get that learning curve out of the way as quickly as possible. And if you're a new teacher, if you're a new teacher, you should expect to probably put in about 10-hour days. just because there's so much going on. There's so much, first of all, you got to do, but then so much you got to learn. 10-hour days. So if you're a teacher and you get to work at 7, leaving at 5 is reasonable. As a new teacher, because think of this mind, the more hours you put in now, it's going to shorten that learning curve, and so you're going to get to the point where you're actually able to enjoy teaching more sooner than if you didn't put the time and effort in now. So put the time and effort in, especially if you're a new teacher. And I promise you, there's plenty to do. But once you kind of commit to that time, whatever that time is going to be, adhere to it. Leave your work at work. Leave your work at work, and when you come home, that way you can be the best version for your spouse and your kids or whoever else it is. But if you keep bringing your work with you, it's just going to weigh you down, and then you're never going to get that rest you need to actually be the effective teacher in the classroom. So create those boundaries. It's going to make your life so much better. Here we go. Teacher tip number 15. Get yourself a timer. My class, man, I'm always keeping track of the time. I tell my students this. I tell my students at the very beginning of the year, hey, I'm very good at keeping track of the time. I've always got timers going. I tell them, do not pack up. I will give you time to pack up. And I keep track of different things. I got the clock on the wall. I got my watch right here that has a timer on it. And then in my classroom itself, I actually have a timer as well. So I'm always keeping the track of the time one way or the other for different reasons. But the timer on the wall, that is mainly for the students. There is something about a timer. And I actually got this from my wife. My wife, for a while there, was doing CrossFit. And I remember I would go to her gym, her CrossFit gym, and they would start a workout, and they had this timer on the wall. And the countdown, and the timer is going, right? And so usually what they have to do so many reps in like in a minute or two, whatever else it is, and there's a rest period. The timer's going, 2 minutes countdown, beeps, there's a minute rest, and then back at it again. So the timer keeps them on pace for their workout, right? And I saw that. And like, oh my gosh, that creates a rhythm, a flow in the class. That creates a sense of urgency. It gives people, they know exactly where they're at in the workout because of the timer. And I thought, how effective would that be in my classroom? And the answer is, it's extremely effective in the classroom. So in my classroom, I have this timer up on the wall at the very front. And it's counting down. Give you an example. Students first walk into the classroom, there's something for them to work on, my warm procedure, and I have the timer going. On the screen, it says you have 5 minutes to complete the warm-up activity. And then I have my timer going. It's counting down, 5 minutes, 4 minutes, and so forth, right? And so students actually have a visual of how long they have to work on the assignment. That creates that sense of urgency. Because if you don't have that, students are going to come in, they're going to mess around, they may chit-chat with somebody a little bit, they may spend a couple minutes looking for a paper or something else. But with that timer growing, that urgency is there from the very beginning, and they are working. They are working. It's amazing what a timer can do. Now, don't be wrong, there's always going to be some students that aren't doing what they're supposed to do. But that timer gets 95% of students focused the moment they come into the class. And the best part is this, let's say 4 minutes have gone by of the class and the student still has not worked. I'll come up to them. I'll say, hey, I'll point to the timer. You've been in class already 4 minutes and you haven't even started. Look, everybody else is working. What's going on? Is there something I can help you with? So that timer is incredible. Creates a sense of urgency. It gives students a feedback of how much longer they have to work on an activity, and it just creates this pace and this flow for your classroom that I personally would not want to do without. So get yourself a timer. It's going to help you so many different ways. Expert teacher tip number 16. Become a master at transitions. Become a master. So ideally, a good lesson, we call it chunking. You're going to chunk the information, all right? Meaning that you're going to chunk the information, let's say in 10-minute increments, all right? And so maybe students are taking notes for 10 minutes, and then maybe from there they're doing a 10 minutes of a different activity to reflect upon what they're doing, and then maybe they're doing 10 minutes of group work and a 10 minutes of something else, but you chunk the information, all right? And so if I have 50 minutes, if I'm able to chunk that information, it's easier for students to process. They don't start zoning out quite as much as they would be if I just said, all right, I got 50 minutes, here we go, all notes, let's go, all right? I'm not saying it's not possible, and it definitely is possible, but chunking does help. But the thing with chunking the information is if you go from one activity to another activity, you got to be able to make that transition smoothly. Because what happens is if you go from one activity to another activity, you're not a master of transitions. And if you don't have transitions down, you're going to lose valuable time there. And worse than that, you might lose your class. You might lose the attention of the class, and there might be behavior problems of it. So you got to know how to go from one activity to the other activity. And so here are some tips on how you might want to do that. One is back to the timer. I have that timer going. So if students have 10 minutes of work activity, timer's going, they know exactly how long they have the work activity. When that timer beeps, boom, that's a visual cue and also a verbal cue that we're moving on to the next activity. So that timer itself, it helps with the transitions. But the other part of it is this, that you want to be prepared. You want to, for example, let's say the next activity is going to be a worksheet the students are going to work on. So we're going from a video clip to a worksheet. Video clip, worksheet, video's over, boom, next is the worksheet. What happens, the video is playing. As the video is playing, I'm going to start passing out the worksheet. Maybe the last 2 minutes of the video, I'm passing out the worksheet. Because what happens if the video ends, and then, all right, everybody, next thing we're going to do is the worksheet, and then I'm passing the worksheet. If it takes me 2 minutes to pass the worksheet, I wasted 2 minutes of teaching time. Plus, that also is 2 minutes where students can start getting distracted, unfocused, and everything else. And what 2 minutes turns into 10 minutes by the time you get the entire class back. So a good transition would be last 2 minutes of the video, pass out the worksheet, all right? And students have the worksheet. And then, let's say after the worksheet, we're going to do group work, right? Maybe you have the timer going, 10 minutes for the worksheet. Timer goes off. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get into our groups. Everybody gets into their groups. You have a transition process in groups, and they get in their groups. And then when they're in their groups, then maybe you're walking around collecting the worksheets. So you got a smooth transition there. But you want to think all of this through. So when you do your lesson planning, once again, start with units, start big, and work your way down to days, right? And then each day, the actual day itself, think exactly how that period's going to go, and think of all the transitions in that period, in that lesson. So that way you can make it seamless. That way you can go from one thing to the other thing and not lose precious teaching time, precious classroom time, and the students can get the most out of your class. And of course, you won't have any issues behavior-wise as well. Expert teacher tip number 17. Oh, this one I learned the hard way, is this. Don't call home on a student during class time. So once again, if there's problems with a student in your classroom and you got to call home to talk to the parents, my recommendation is do not call during class time. Now, if you have a relationship with the parent before and you know it's going to go smooth, okay, that's maybe a different story. But this is your first time calling or second time calling, don't do it during class. Because here's 99% time, here's what's going to happen. Let's say something's going on with student's behavior is not going where it should be. You're like, hey, I got to call home. And you call home with the hope to get the parent on the line so they can talk to your student to get their behavior in check. It's probably not going to happen. What's probably going to happen is you're going to call home and you're going to get a voicemail. And everything that, it's kind of like you're building up to that, like, oh, I'm going to talk to your parent. And then they're not there. You lose that momentum. You lose that intensity of it, right? So if you get a voicemail, that ruins everything, right? So that's not a good outcome. Another outcome is maybe you call home, and here we go, they speak a different language. Then what? Then like, then you sound like an idiot. So that might be a problem. Or worst case scenario, you call home and you talk to the parent, and the parent takes your student's side. Now that's all happening in your class. First of all, when you do that, when you're calling home, the whole class is looking at you, right? So the whole class is looking to see how this plays out. So let's do a role scenario here. So I have a student in a classroom. I asked them to give me their phone because they're on their phone, and they refuse to give me their phone. And so I said, okay, I got to call home now because you refuse to give me your phone. I call home, voicemail. Okay, well, then what? That helped me know at all. Our different language. Oh, that helped me out. But then I get the parent. The parent's like, well, actually, I'm okay with my student having their phone because actually I'm the one that texted them. Now the whole class is looking at you as you're trying not only try to deal with the student, now you're also trying to deal with the parent. Any credibility you had goes out the door. And so it just does, more often than not, it does not work out like you think it's going to work out. So for that reason, unless I already had a conversation with the parent, unless the parent and I already are in sync and we know things are going to go well, I know they're home, I will not call home during class. I'll save it for my prep period. I'll call home and work out the situation then. So trust me on this one, more often than not, it does not work well. Here we go. Expert teacher tip number 19, you are not alone. You are not alone. Oh, man. So going back to when I first started teaching, and that first year, like I said, I almost got fired that first year. Almost got fired the first year of teaching. But I remember I was at a meeting, a teacher meeting, and the principal showed us this graph. And this graph, it changed my perspective. It showed the teachers, right, year one, them starting. But by year five of teaching, more than half the teachers quit. I want to make sure you got that. More than half the teachers that start teaching do not make it to year 5. That's scary if you think about it, right? You spend to become a teacher. Here's what it takes. You got to go through 4 years of college to get your bachelor's. Then you got to go 2 years to get your teacher credential. You got to pass all sorts of different tests. You got to do student teaching. So in essence, it takes about 7 years to become a teacher. And then you become the teacher. 7 years to become a teacher, and you thought you were in love and thought this is it. And then you become a teacher. And because of just the situation, because it's not what you thought it was going to be, because it's harder than you expected it to be, you got the student behavior, you name it, you don't make it to 5 years, right? That's kind of a sad story. And I was almost one of those teachers that did not make it to my first 5 years, because once again, the first year was just horrible for me. But here's the thing I want to make sure you understand is you are not alone. If you are a teacher right now and you are struggling, more often than not, it's with classroom behavior. If you're struggling with classroom behavior, just know you are not alone. If you're a teacher right now and you're feeling overwhelmed by the work going on, I'm letting you know right now, you are not alone. If you're a teacher right now and you feel that you just can't catch your breath, you are not alone. I've been teaching 20 years. I've known so many different teachers. I'm currently a mentor to many different teachers, and the stories you hear, unless you actually, because every time we're on campus, we ask somebody else, "Hey, how's it going?" They're like, "Oh, it's going good. It's going fine. How's it going?" "It's going all right." Right? That's our response. But if you really start talking to some of the teachers, you realize things are not going that well. You got issues with administration, you got the district problems, you got problems with students, you got lack of pay, you name it, all these issues are going on. Teachers are struggling. We're struggling, and you might be one of those teachers. And you can feel like you're in this alone, that you think to yourself, no one else is going through what you're going through. But I promise you, we are all going through this. They're teachers. I've talked to. I live in California, but I've been mentoring teachers back east. I've mentored teachers in Midwest, and no matter where you're at, the problems are the same. We are all trying to figure this out. We are. It is just one thing after the other, and it's difficult. Oh my God! Unless you're in the teaching profession, you do not know how difficult it is to be a teacher. there's just so many things coming at you. I mean, I've once heard someone say that teachers make more decisions in a day than almost any other profession, right? You got to make more decisions. I mean, here we go. If you're a teacher, you can relate to this. First 5 minutes of class, here's all the things you got to take care of the first 5 minutes of class. You got to stand by your door as the students are coming in, as they're leaving. You got to stand by your door as students are coming in. You got to say hi to the students. You got to make sure you have your lesson up on the board ready to go. Students are coming in. You got to make sure they're not poking each other. You know, they got to make sure everybody makes it to the right seat. You got to make sure the behavior check. You got to check for dress code. You got to check for all these different things. Students are finally all in your class, and now the bell's finally ring. And now you got to make sure that students are working. They're on task. You got to make sure you do your attendance. You got to answer phone calls coming in. Student has to go to the restroom. Student has to go to the nurse. You got to collect some work. You got to do all of these things within the first 5 minutes of teaching, right? That is a lot. And unless you have things down, unless you have things put in place, you can become quickly overwhelmed with that. So as teachers, it is very, very difficult profession. And then you add on top of that, just all the other responsibilities that we have to do as teachers. We got meetings we have to go to, we got parent-teacher conferences, we got grading we have to do, we got lesson plan we do, we got copies we got to make. All of these things can get so overwhelming. And so it is no surprise that many teachers do not make it to year 5. And the sad part about it is this, that many districts, many schools, they don't have that mentorship going on. They don't. I was lucky enough my first year to have that one teacher I was able to observe and shadow for a week or two. Without that, I would have been lost. And many teachers do not have somebody to lean on, someone to talk to, someone to get tips from, or someone just to listen to everything going on. And if you don't have that, it feels like you are alone. And if you feel like you're alone, you're going to start to give up. Don't give up. It does get better. If you go home feeling exhausted and worn out and thinking, man, I can't believe that happened in my class, there's room for improvement, and it can get better. And so that's how I felt early on in my teaching career, and I know that feeling all so well. I'm so glad to say the other side of it, now that I truly enjoy teaching, but it wasn't always that way, and I felt alone. I felt I was not doing the best I could. I felt not worthy to be a teacher. So if you're feeling any which way like that, you're not alone, and you are worthy. You are. Students need you. And here's the thing you got to learn to do. No matter where you're at in your teaching career, you got to find those golden nuggets. You got to find those little diamonds in the rough. Anytime something good happens, you got to kind of, I listen to David Goggins. He talks about a cookie jar, right? Anytime something good happens, he puts a mental note in his cookie jar. You need to do that. You need to create a little cookie jar. Anytime something good happens, put something good. If a student comes up to you and says, you're my favorite teacher, if they give you a card or a present for Christmas, that's a cookie. You put it in a cookie jar. Because when those rough days come and the rough times come and you start doubting yourself, you're going to be able to pull things out of the cookie jar. And you got to know that even if you're having the worst time of your life right now, I guarantee you are making a difference in at least one kid's life. And if you're doing that, you're doing good. All right. And so with that, you're just going to build upon it. You're just to become a better teacher. You're going to learn from your mistakes. You're going to learn different techniques. You're going to create routines, procedures. You're going to get the classroom management thing down. And it may take you, it took me 7 years. It may take you some time. But if it takes you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years to finally get comfortable in that classroom and to finally be the teacher you're looking to be, isn't it worth it? You spent 7 years going to school. Isn't it worth it to hang in there, become the best teacher so that in 5 years you can have this down? Now, I say this overall, but if you really find yourself in a spot where it is unhealthy, that's a different story. If you're part of a school where they're taking advantage of you, that's a different story. Or if you finally realize that, yeah, you know what, this really is not my call, and this is something I really do not want to do, that's understandable. But if you're thinking about quitting just because classroom management might be an issue, or if you're thinking about quitting just because you may not get along with the administration, I would ask you to reconsider, because you're not alone and things can get better. So keep in mind that learning, keep in mind that thing where most teachers quit, half teachers quit by year 5. Where are you at in that process? And if you can make it to year 5, and that was what I took away from that. You know what? If I can make it to year 5, then I could probably do this the rest of my life. That was the thought process. And it worked out that way. Luckily for me, it worked out that way. I made it to year 5 and I got a little bit better. And by year 7, I finally felt comfortable. So for all the teachers out there, please stay strong, stay committed, stay committed. Stay committed mainly to yourself. Stay committed to becoming the best version of yourself. Because when you're the best version of yourself, then you become the best version of the teacher for your students. And if you ever find yourself needing extra help, extra support, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm on YouTube. You can reach out to me, find my email there, and I'd be more than happy to help you in any which way possible. So with that said, enjoy the rest of your day. Stay strong, and we got this. We are stronger together.